harnessing the demographic dividend through investment in the continent's youth. Can a weekend exercise routine keep you fit? A new study says yes. And does your mother have to keep reminding you to sit up straight? Now there's an app for that. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory and this is Africa 54. Now, May 25th is Africa Day and the continent now has the largest percentage of people under 35 years old. Experts say that presents both opportunities and challenges. Harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in youth is the theme of this year's Africa Day celebrations. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more.
For more than half a century, May 25th is observed around the world and particularly in Africa to celebrate the continent's identity and unity. It's also an opportunity for each individual to reflect on what the day means for them.
Celebrating Africa Day to me is recognizing not only what Africa has contributed to the rest of the world, willingly and or unwillingly, through slave trades, through wars, through colonization, but also through trade, cultural and civilizational exchanges.
Mohamed Saliu Kamara is the chairman of the African Studies Department at Howard University. He says a youth population bubble brings both challenges and opportunities.
You have so many young people, talented young people, educated young people, connected with the rest of the world, and now many of whom don't have, jobs, gainful employment, and so on. So I think that is a combination of potential advantage, but real challenges.
Raymond Morrow has been involved in many youth organizations in East Africa. He spoke via Skype from London.
Still, there is a gap between the stakeholders, business stakeholders, and the education sector, whereby they don't come together and see if our young graduates can be marketable into the labor jobs.
Morrow is working on his master's degree in African peace and conflict studies. He says he supports this year's theme and the UN's Africa Agenda 2063.
It's an agenda that talks on reforming the African continent, but how do we reform it? We reform through policies. So the policies that are not good to us, we think that they are outdated, we can relinquish them.
One problem-solving method is regional integration, such as the West African Economic Bloc, ECOWAS.
Why don't we integrate these countries in a way that Senegalese young people can find employment in Guinea and vice versa? People, the same way you can travel throughout the 15 nation states of ECOWAS without needing a visa as long as your passport is valid, why not have an ECOWAS-wide university system and ECOWAS-wide educational system?
Kamara points to Botswana, Tanzania, Mauritius, Senegal, Sao Tome and Principe, and Cape Verde as examples of African countries whose stability, democratic governance, and economic progress other countries can look to for inspiration. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Well, 8 men are now in custody in connection with Monday's suicide bombing at a Manchester, England pop concert, including 2 men who were arrested in separate raids early Thursday. Now, meanwhile, Libyan security forces say they have arrested a brother and the father of Manchester suicide bomber Salman Abedi. A spokesman for the Libyan anti-terrorism force says Hashim Abedi had recently been in contact with his brother and knew of his plan for the attack. The spokesman also said the anti-terror group has been following Hashim for a month and have evidence that he and his brother have been involved with the Islamic State militant group, which claimed responsibility for the attack. Salman Abedi blew himself up in the Manchester arena, killing 22 people and wounding scores of others just moments after the concert ended. Abedi's father, Ramadan, told Reuters he spoke to his son 5 days ago and everything was normal.
Salman was studying in Northern Den College in South Manchester. He did not have any problems and he passed his 2 years with high marks.
Well, Manchester Chief Constable Ian Hopkins told reporters Wednesday it is clear Abedi did not act alone.
I think it's very clear that this is a network that we are investigating, and as I've said, it continues at a pace. There's extensive investigations going on and activity taking place across Greater Manchester as we speak.
Well, a woman arrested Wednesday during a raid on an apartment north of Manchester has been released without charge. Now, British officials are angry over U.S. leaks to the media of investigative details of the Manchester bombing. Prime Minister Theresa May is expected to raise concerns Thursday in a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump met early Thursday with European Union Council President Donald Tusk and European Commission head Jean-Claude Juncker at EU headquarters before a NATO summit. Trump has called terrorism the #1 problem currently facing the world and says tremendous progress is being made in the fight against terrorism. Police working on the Manchester case, who are furious about the disclosures, have stopped sharing information with their American counterparts, according to the BBC. The halt in sharing police information with the United States will remain in place until assurances are received from Washington. There will be no further leaks, according to the Reuters news agency. Now, NATO leaders are meeting in Brussels Thursday amid tight security for a summit dominated by the terrorist attack in Manchester. It is the first encounter of many of the leaders with U.S. President Donald Trump, who during his campaign called the alliance obsolete for not effectively countering terrorism. Now, VOA's Luis Ramirez reports from Brussels that Europe's recent terrorist attacks mean the U.S. leader may get the support he needs to strengthen the alliance's anti-terrorist efforts.
Thousands of leftist demonstrators marched in Brussels against both NATO and the U.S. leader. Some said they actually welcomed Trump's earlier criticism of NATO, but are now disappointed that he is engaging the alliance.
Trump said good things during the campaign. He said America would not be involved in the whole world. I thought that was great. But now his government is pressured both by Democrats and the Republican establishment, who have him by the neck, and he has changed his thinking and has a policy as aggressive as Obama's.
Trump arrived in Brussels at a time when Europe is extremely tense following this week's terrorist attack in Manchester, England. The mood is ripe for leaders to take decisive action against terrorism.
The attacks we saw in Manchester will be something which will be addressed, I think, actually by all leaders in one way or another, because the attacks were brutal and they deliberately targeted children, young people and families.
Trump's core message to members is that they should start spending their fair share, or 2% of their gross national income, on defense.
We are making progress. After many years of decline, total defense spending by European allies and Canada rose by billions of dollars last year.
But spending more on defense is politically a hard sell for Western European countries with their hefty social welfare programs. At a protest camp in Brussels, anti-NATO activists worry.
Means an enormous amount of money dedicated to war and an enormous amount of money that's not dedicated to things like education, healthcare, and those sort of things.
The summit gets underway as new French President Emmanuel Macron seeks to extend a state of emergency in France. The recent spate of terrorist attacks in France and Britain mean NATO leaders will be more inclined to talk about war than peace. This is not these protesters' day. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, Brussels.
Now, the U.S., Britain and the United Nations was skeptical on Wednesday of South Sudanese President Salva Kiir's declaration of a unilateral ceasefire on Monday. Kiir also said he would release political prisoners, but with no sign of a political deal with rebels, it was not clear whether a ceasefire would take hold. Now, UN South Sudan envoy David Shearer welcomed the announcement, but warned that they would be closely scrutinized. UN peacekeepers have been deployed since South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011. Both British UN Ambassador Matthew Rycroft and Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Michelle Sison say the responsibility is now on Kiir to prove that these are meaningful commitments, not just convenient timing with the start of a rainy season when fighting is made more difficult. South Sudan has been mired in a civil war since 2013 when President Kiir fired his deputy and opposition leader Riek Machar. Now, violent attacks on foreign residents have grabbed headlines in South Africa in recent years, with graphic scenes of looting and angry anti-immigrant protests dominating coverage. But foreign residents of the Rainbow Nation say the headlines obscure a sobering fact. Xenophobic violence never has really gone away here. VOA's Anita Powell spent time with members of Johannesburg's Somali community to learn more.
Johannesburg's Somali community is busy preparing for Ramadan and praying that anti-immigrant attacks will remain at bay during the holy month. But community members say while few incidents rise to the level of the violent attacks against foreign-owned businesses seen earlier this year, xenophobic violence in the form of harassment, robbery, or looting is a persistent problem. Civil society groups say they hear daily accounts of crimes against immigrants, and South African authorities are often reluctant to intervene when foreign nationals are targeted. Community members agree.
Xenophobia in South Africa has never ended, and I think for me it's not going to end. It happens on a daily basis on a very small scale in different parts of the country.
Foreign shopkeepers say they are regularly targeted because of their nationality.
And the xenophobia, not one time, 2 times, 3 times, several of times when they come to, up to now today, they take from me 4,000 rand in my shop. Now my brother come to you through to here. He told me that they looted even today in my shop. Now, I'm talking to you now.
Analysts say South Africa's high unemployment and inequality drive this violence. During protests earlier this year, anti-immigrant demonstrators blamed foreigners for taking away scarce jobs and resources. Here in the predominantly Somali suburb of Mayfair, residents say they feel safety in numbers because they do not feel the government has listened to their suggestions on how to improve safety. Mustafa Omar Khado had his store ransacked recently.
I was expecting at least they will say that we are going to take care of you from now on, so it will not happen. They don't say that. They say, actually, we cannot do nothing.
In the meantime, he says, he can only pray for peace and safety. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, can your workout wait until the weekend? A new study sheds light on weekend warrior fitness routines. Stay with us.
I'm Ilar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Well, it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Medur with a look at the benefits of exercise. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vincent. Well, get this. If you are like many people who are pressed for time making a living during the week, with little to no time for exercise, working out only on the weekends could lessen your risk of dying prematurely almost as effectively as more frequent, shorter workouts spread throughout the week, a so-called weekend warrior phenomenon. In a recent study published in the medical journal JAMA International Medicine, researchers compared adults who worked out throughout the week to adults who jammed a week's worth of exercise into 2 days. The findings showed that compared to the adults who reported no exercise activities, well, weekend warriors and regular exercisers had about a 40% lower risk of death due to cardiovascular disease, 30% lower risk of overall death, and 18% lower risk of death due to cancer. Joining us now live from New York is Dr. Lily Rosenthal, physical medicine and rehabilitation physician. Dr. Rosenthal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
First off, let me have your reaction to this report. To what extent can we reap benefit from only 2 days of exercising? And aren't there some dangers there?
Yeah, actually, the report that the study that you cite is extremely exciting because we have this kind of negative connotation of a weekend warrior cramming in exercise, the sort of middle-aged guy running out and playing soccer just Saturday and Sunday and not doing anything during the week. And we sort of thought badly about that. But this new exciting research shows that some exercise is definitely better than none. As you noted, that 40% decreased mortality and even some exercise. But there are risks. There are injuries that can occur with just cramming it in on the weekend.
Absolutely. I can imagine. I mean, to do all of this in just 2 days, there will be some aches and pains. So what are some of the best practices? How do we avoid some of these injuries?
Yeah, I love answering this question because I'm all about prevention. So the first thing is we really want to I always remind my patients that you want to warm up and then cool down at the end of exercise. The other thing that's super important is to keep hydrated. So drinking water, not sports drinks because they have a lot of sugar, which actually can be inflammatory, but water is the best hydration practice. And also foods. We often don't realize this, but foods can actually act as medicines and have anti-inflammatory properties. So as I brought with me here today, there are foods that are remarkably helpful in reducing inflammation and helping either recover from injury or prevent injury. Some bok choy, Brussels sprouts, berries, ginger, some tropical fruits like passion fruit and mango. Very, very helpful. But once again, we do have injuries actually from cramming it in, and there are things that I recommend that are sort of quick, easy, safe. Speaking of plants, there are plant-based medicines that one that I really love to recommend is a homeopathic medicine called Arnicare. It's topical, it's odorless, and it works to help with muscle sprains and strains, which is really the most common injuries that we see from the weekend exercisers.
So tell us about some of the exercise does and don'ts to prevent injuries.
Well, the cram do's are, again, warming up and cooling down afterwards and eating well, getting sleep. Fatigue is another factor for having injuries, so making sure that our bodies is restored. So these are things we should be doing. And again, if we have an injury, using something like a topical plant-based medicine like Arnica is for the injury. So those are the do's. The don'ts would be exercising back-to-back. Well, we already said that. With the weekend warrior, it's better to do something, but we also want to change it up. So not do the same type of exercise every time you're exercising. So I often recommend to patients walk in between the week just to keep your muscles conditioned. You also want to not put your ego into it and be super competitive. You want to listen to your body and you want to sort of manage the reasons why you're doing exercise. So sometimes a little less is more, which we're finding out again, a little less exercise is better than nothing, but too much, too hard driving can definitely put you on the sidelines. So you want to be careful with that.
So very quickly, for people who are not used to exercising, what would you say is like one of the easiest things to do?
Yeah, great question. I would say the best exercise is the one that you'll actually do. So for most people, I recommend, it's true, right? If you don't like it, you're not going to do it. People get fancy. I live in New York City, so everybody's talking about the gym. Well, you know what? Just going out and walking has dramatic health benefits. All right. So walking for an hour, yeah.
Perfect. Walking. We will keep that in mind. Thank you so much, Dr. Rosenthal.
Thanks for having me.
And that was Dr. Lily Rosenthal, physical medicine and rehabilitation expert. Now, humanitarian agencies are stepping up their efforts to provide clean drinking water to civilians escaping fighting in South Sudan's Upper Nile region.
In Abu Rock, in the northern Upper Nile region of South Sudan, tens of thousands of civilians escaping violent clashes between government and opposition forces struggle to find safe water. UN agencies say water shortages, inadequate sanitation and poor hygiene pose additional risks to malnourished children in South Sudan and could lead to fatal diarrheal diseases. Humanitarian organizations were forced to withdraw from the area last month when fresh fighting erupted. The UN Children's Agency UNICEF says about 5 million people are affected.
Here we drink water from the stream, and whenever we use this water for bathing, we get rashes. Like my skin now has a rash. But what can we do? Nobody is able to stay here. We will go to Sudan because in Sudan the humanitarian assistance is better.
The deployment of peacekeepers by the United Nations mission in South Sudan has since seen agencies intensify efforts to provide clean water as the threat of a cholera outbreak looms. About 17 aid agencies are providing assistance, including food, water, sanitation and medical care, as well as shelter in Abu Rock, which borders Sudan. UN Humanitarian Coordinator for South Sudan, Eugene Owusu, says conflict is the fundamental problem.
Needless conflict is creating untold human suffering. And all what we are doing as humanitarians and even as UNMISS is really dealing with the consequences of a problem. The fundamental problem is conflict. We need to fix the politics. We need to stop this needless fighting. The guns have to stay silent to give South Sudanese the opportunity to live in peace, to live in prosperity, and also to live a life of dignity.
Civil war erupted in South Sudan in late 2013. The fighting has forced more than 3 million people to flee their homes and plunged parts of the country into famine.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore. Now, be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Is your aching back killing you? Well, this gadget could help. We'll be right back.
የሀገር ጉዳይ በሆነ ጉዳይ ላይ
kiasi but inafaa wapunguze vitu zingine.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Slouching over screens could be a thing of the past, thanks to a wearable gadget that reminds you to sit up straight. Now, the brainchild of Israeli developers, the Upright Pro is a small device taped to the back that senses posture and vibrates to nudge the user to straighten up. It can be synced with a smartphone app to track posture data over time, monitor the user's progress in a training program, and share the information with friends. Now, the device has 2 sensors, and the algorithm detects any slumping by the user. The device lasts up to 8 days with 1 charge and is made up out of medical-grade silicone. Well, next up, movie makeup is a vital part of the film industry, with millions of dollars being spent on helping us to suspend belief and become part of a fantasy which exists on screen. Interest in the production side of films is increasing, with a growing number of universities in Britain offering courses. Conventions like the International Makeup Trade Show in London give the pros the chance to learn from one another and show off their skills. The pressure of makeup artists is real. Audiences expect realism. HD cameras pick up every flaw, and directors demand that makeup help actors transform into characters. Well, and finally, Japanese automaker Subaru is looking for innovative ways to enhance pedestrian safety. One solution, equipping exterior airbags on its new vehicles. While the number of pedestrian accidents in Japan have been almost halved in the last 10 years, the number of deaths remain high, down only 27%, according to Japanese police statistics. Subaru's research and development manager says a growing elderly population in Japan is part of the reason for the fatalities, and that is what is trending today. Well, now, coffee connoisseurs recently gathered in Cameroon for Festi Coffee 2017. There's a festival that celebrates the beverage and encourages its consumption. Cameroon is one of the few African producers of Robusta and Arabica beans, and it exports the products around the world. Africa 54's Caroline Turner has more.
Despite coffee being one of Cameroon's main cash crops, its coffee drinking culture has been slow to take off. To get more Cameroonians to drink coffee, a group of investors recently held the 4th edition of Festi Coffee in the capital, Yaoundé. The event brought together producers, coffee roasters, and consumers to showcase and sample the different varieties of coffee available in the country.
20 years or so ago, we ranked 12th globally as a coffee producer, but today we are not even on the list. But the coffee sector is slowly being revived by a few roasters who are trying to transform the local industry.
For decades, Cameroon's coffee output has declined, partly due to low investment and poor agricultural practices. To increase coffee output, the government plans to invest more than $21 million. Officials say this is expected to increase the country's output to 100,000 tons over the next 5 years by creating centers to produce cocoa and coffee seedlings, targeting around 452,000 farmers. Investors say Cameroon needs to capitalize on its unique blends.
Un événement comme Festi Coffee permet vraiment.
You can compare the Arabica and Robusta from different regions, which will allow producers to see which regions have the best coffee, which will push them to produce the best. Cameroon produces around 20,000 tons of coffee a year and exports, but only about 10% of the coffee is sold on the local market.
Cameroon exported 24,500 tons of coffee last season, up from 23,800 tons the previous season. Because of low local consumption, coffee roasters like Toricam depend on foreign clients to buy most of their produce. The company recently introduced a manual coffee maker that's easy to use.
We are trying to find other ways to encourage the consumption of coffee, something that would please everyone, something that we can easily execute and distribute to consumers.
Exports of cocoa and coffee resumed from Cameroon on May 15th after a dock workers' strike ended. Carolyn Turner, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. When something loses its original shape or form, it does not look very natural or comfortable.
Bent out of shape.
Hey, did you tell Greg about my dinner party?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was invited.
Well, now he's all bent out of shape because I didn't invite him.
I'm sorry.